Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him and yawned. Another boring night shift on Neptune Station. The coffee in his cup had gone cold 3 hours ago, but he drank it anyway. Outside the windows, Neptune's blue surface rotated slowly below them. Stars filled the black space beyond, unchanged and unchanging. Jake had been running this monitoring station for 7 years. 7 long, quiet years. Nothing ever happened out here. The station's job was simple. Listen to deep space, record any signals, send reports back to Earth. Most days they recorded nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional pulsar beacon. The station crew was small, just 12 people floating in a tin can at the edge of the solar system. Scientists mostly, with a few engineers to keep the equipment running. No soldiers, no weapons. Earth didn't need warriors anymore. That war had ended 300 years ago, and humanity had promised to never fight again. Jake rubbed his eyes and checked the time. 2 more hours until his shift ended. Then Lucy Bennett would take over. Lucy was young, fresh out of the academy, still excited about space monitoring. Give her a few years, Jake thought. She would learn to be bored like the rest of them. The console beeped. Jake looked down, expecting another automated system check. Instead, the screen showed something different. An incoming signal. His hand moved to the analysis button out of habit. The computer worked for several seconds, longer than usual. That was strange. Most signals were simple. Radio waves from distant stars, electromagnetic pulses from black holes. Standard stuff. This signal made the computer think hard. Finally, the results appeared. Jake sat up straight, suddenly very awake. The signal was encrypted. Quantum encryption, the display said. Military grade. And it was repeating over and over like someone desperately trying to get attention. Jake hit the intercom button. His voice echoed through the empty corridors of the station. Lucy appeared first, running onto the bridge, still pulling on her uniform jacket. Then came Kyle Chen, the chief engineer, and Nina Carter, who handled navigation. Others followed. They all crowded around Jake's station, staring at the screen. Lucy leaned close, her eyes wide. She understood what she was seeing. They all did. In 7 years, Neptune Station had never received a military signal. Never received anything encrypted. Never received anything that seemed urgent. Kyle pushed his glasses up his nose. The engineer was old, almost 60, and had been in space longer than anyone else on the station. He pointed at the encryption code. It was ancient, he said. A universal translator protocol from before humans even left Earth. Whoever sent this message wanted anyone to be able to read it. Lucy's fingers flew across the decryption keyboard. She was the communications expert, the best they had. If anyone could crack this code, she could. The others waited in silence. Outside, Neptune continued its slow rotation. Inside, everyone held their breath. The message decoded with a soft chime. Text appeared on the main screen in clear English. Jake read it out loud, his voice shaking slightly. It was a distress call, a desperate plea for help from somewhere called the Veil Nebula. A species named the Velcor was dying. The message told a terrible story. The Velcor were peaceful. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. Another species called the Kresh Dominion had invaded their worlds. The Kresh were killing everyone. Women, children, elderly, it did not matter. The Kresh destroyed entire cities, burned forests, poisoned oceans. The Velcor were being erased from existence. The Velcor had sent messages to every species in the galaxy. They begged for help, for soldiers, for weapons, for anything. No one came. No one wanted to fight the Kresh. The Kresh were too powerful, too ruthless. Better to let the Velcor die than risk becoming the next target. But the Velcor remembered old stories. Legends from centuries ago about human warriors. Humans who fought impossible battles and won. Humans who protected the weak and punished the wicked. The Velcor did not know if the legends were true. They did not know if humans still existed. But they had no one else to ask. The message ended with a simple plea. If any humans were listening, please come. Please help. Please do not let the Velcor disappear from history. Silence filled the bridge. No one spoke. No one moved. Nina finally broke the quiet, her voice barely a whisper. She checked the signal's origin point. The Veil Nebula was 800 light-years away. 800 light-years of empty space between Neptune Station and a dying species. Jake stood up and walked to the main window. He stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying. An entire civilization was being murdered and no one was helping. The galaxy was just watching it happen. Kyle spoke up from behind him. The engineer reminded Jake about the rules. Earth had signed treaties. Humans were not allowed to interfere in galactic conflicts. The penalty for breaking those treaties was severe. Earth could be expelled from civilized space, cut off from all trade and communication. Humanity could become isolated and alone. Jake knew all this. He had read the treaties during his academy training. Humanity had fought a terrible war 300 years ago, so terrible that every species involved had begged for peace. Humans had agreed to stop fighting. They put their weapons away and promised to never raise them again. But Kyle said something else. Something that made Jake turn around. The engineer pointed at a star chart on his tablet. He showed Jake a location deep in the Kuiper Belt. Station Theta 9, he said, the place where humanity's weapons were sleeping. Jake knew about Theta 9. Every military officer did, even station commanders like him. It was a legend, a ghost story, a myth that people whispered about. Supposedly, humanity had not destroyed their weapons after the war. They had hidden them, frozen them, kept them just in case the galaxy needed warriors again. Thousands of warships, Kyle said. Millions of soldiers in frozen sleep. The most powerful military force ever created by any species. All waiting in the cold and dark. Waiting for someone to wake them up. Lucy looked at Jake with fear in her eyes. She asked what they should do. Should they report the message to Earth Command and forget about it? Let the politicians decide? Let the Velcor die while committees had meetings and debates? Nina pulled up more information on her console. She had been researching the Kresh Dominion. What she found made everyone's blood run cold. The Kresh had conquered 17 star systems in the last 10 years. They never took prisoners, never made slaves. They simply killed everyone and took everything of value. Entire species had vanished. But Nina found something worse. She showed them a map of Kresh expansion. The red line showing their conquered territory was moving in a specific direction. Not random, not scattered. The Kresh were expanding toward something. They were heading toward human space. Kyle did quick calculations on his tablet. If the Kresh kept their current pace, they would reach the edge of human territory in 20 years. Maybe less if they decided to move faster. The Velcor were not the Kresh's final target. They were just in the way. Jake made his decision. He walked to the communications console and opened a priority channel to Earth. He sent a full report of the Velcor distress call, the Kresh Dominion, and the threat to human space. He marked it urgent and flagged it for the Security Council. Then he did something that would change everything. He opened the station's command interface and entered his authorization codes. Neptune Station began to move. The engines fired, pushing the small station away from its orbit. Jake entered new coordinates into the navigation system. Kyle looked at the destination and gasped. Station Theta 9. Jake was taking them to the frozen armada. Lucy grabbed his arm and asked if he was sure. This could mean the end of his career. The end of all their careers. Earth Command would be furious. Jake looked at his crew. These 12 people were scientists and engineers. They had signed up to study space, not to start wars. But they were also humans, and humans had a reputation. When someone cried for help, humans answered. It was that simple. He told them the truth. The Velcor were dying right now. Every minute they delayed meant more deaths. Earth Command would take weeks to make a decision, maybe months. By then, the Velcor would be extinct. Someone had to act, and that someone was going to be him. If anyone wanted to leave, Jake said now was the time. He would understand. This was not their fight. They could take the escape pods back to Neptune. No one would blame them. No one moved. No one left. Kyle sat down at the engineering console and started running diagnostics on the engines. Lucy returned to communications and began monitoring channels. Nina pulled up the route to Station Theta 9. The others went to their stations without a word. Neptune Station accelerated into deep space, leaving its orbit behind. The small monitoring station, which had never traveled more than a few thousand kilometers, began a journey into the outer solar system. Toward the Kuiper Belt, toward the ice moon called Station Theta 9, toward 300 years of sleeping warriors. Jake sat in the captain's chair and watched the stars stream past. He had no idea if his command codes would even work at Theta 9. The station had been sealed for centuries. Maybe the systems were dead. Maybe the ships were broken. Maybe the frozen soldiers would never wake up. But he had to try. The Velcor had sent their message across 8. The days passed slowly as Neptune Station traveled deeper into the solar system. Jake spent most of his time on the bridge watching the navigation display. The small dot representing their station crept across the star map toward the Kuiper Belt. It seemed to take forever. Lucy worked at the communications console around the clock. She monitored every channel, listening for news about the Velcor. What she found made everyone sick. The Velcor's broadcasts were getting weaker, fewer messages, shorter messages. The silences between transmissions grew longer each day. Kyle and his engineering team kept the station's engines running at maximum capacity. The old monitoring station had never been designed for long-distance travel. Systems kept breaking down, cooling units failed, power conduits overheated. The engineers worked without sleep, fixing problems as fast as they appeared. Nina researched everything she could find about the Kresh Dominion. The information was terrifying. The Kresh were an insectoid species, something like giant mantises. They organized themselves into hives with queens that controlled worker and warrior classes. Their technology was crude but effective. They did not believe in diplomacy or mercy. The Kresh conquered planets by overwhelming them with numbers. Thousands of ships would descend on a world like locusts. They would destroy all defenses, kill all inhabitants, and strip the planet of anything valuable. Then they would move to the next target. Simple, brutal, and horrifyingly effective. What made Nina's research worse was the discovery of a pattern. She plotted every Kresh conquest on a 3-dimensional map. The pattern was clear. The Kresh were not expanding randomly. They were moving in a deliberate line through the galaxy, a line that pointed directly at human space. Kyle did the calculations. At their current rate of expansion, the Kresh would reach the first human colonies in 18 years. They would reach Earth in 30. These were not exact numbers, Kyle warned. The Kresh could speed up. They could slow down. But the direction was certain. Eventually, the Kresh and humans would meet. On the 10th day of travel, Earth Command finally responded to Jake's priority message. The response was not friendly. An admiral appeared on the communication screen, his face red with anger. Jake was ordered to return to Neptune immediately. He was accused of abandoning his post, stealing government property, and violating a dozen regulations. Jake listened to the entire message without interrupting. When the admiral finished, Jake sent a simple reply. He explained about the Velcor. He explained about the Kresh. He explained that someone had to act now, not later. Then he closed the channel and continued toward Station Theta 9. More messages came from Earth. Threats of court-martial. Promises of prison. Orders to turn back. Jake ignored them all. His crew stood behind him. They had made their choice. Whatever happened, they would face it together. On day 14, Station Theta 9 appeared on their sensors. Nina brought up the visual display and everyone gathered to look. At first, they saw nothing. Just a small ice moon, like thousands of others in the Kuiper Belt. Dark and cold and seemingly dead. But as they got closer, details emerged. The moon was too smooth, too round. Natural moons had craters and rough surfaces. This one looked almost manufactured. Because it was, Kyle whispered. This was not a moon. It was a construction. A hollow sphere built to hide something precious. Jake guided Neptune Station into orbit around Theta 9. He searched the surface for an entrance, a doorway, anything. For an hour, they found nothing. Then Lucy spotted it, a series of markings on the ice, so subtle they were almost invisible. Coordinates, she said. An access point. Jake maneuvered the station to the coordinates. Up close, they could see a large circular section of the ice that looked slightly different from the rest. This was it. The entrance to humanity's secret tomb. The doorway to the sleeping army. With shaking hands, Jake accessed the command interface. He entered his authorization codes, the same codes that let him control Neptune Station. He had no idea if they would work here. Station Theta 9 had been sealed for 300 years. The systems might be dead. The codes might be obsolete. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then lights appeared on the ice surface. Red lights forming geometric patterns around the circular section. The ice began to move. The entire circular section, easily a kilometer across, started to rotate. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life after centuries of silence. The section rotated 90 degrees, then split into 6 triangular pieces. Each piece slowly retracted into the moon's surface, revealing darkness underneath. The darkness was absolute, deeper than space itself. Jake realized he was looking into a hollow moon, a vast empty sphere carved out of ice and rock. He guided Neptune Station through the opening. Internal lights activated automatically, triggered by their proximity. Row after row of lights flickered on, spreading outward into the darkness. The lights revealed what lay inside Station Theta 9, and everyone on Neptune Station stopped breathing. Ships, thousands of ships, warships of every size and type, arranged in perfect geometric formations. Dreadnoughts as large as cities, bristling with weapons, carrier vessels designed to launch hundreds of fighters, cruisers built for speed and firepower, frigates meant for stealth operations, destroyers, gunships, assault craft, support vessels, an entire military navy frozen in time. Kyle identified the ship classes from old historical records. He pointed out the Titans, the largest ships ever built. 12 of them floated in the center of the formation, each one 3 kilometers long. These were not just ships. They were mobile fortresses, capable of destroying entire fleets by themselves. But impressive as the ships were, they were empty. No lights in the windows. No engine glow. No signs of life. Jake understood. The ships were ready to fly, but they had no crews. The humans who flew these ships were somewhere else inside the station. Nina located the central command node deep inside the station. Jake piloted Neptune Station through the fleet, weaving between massive warships. It felt wrong somehow. This tiny civilian station moving among giants, like a child walking through a graveyard of sleeping dragons. The command node was a large structure built into the inner surface of the hollow moon. Jake docked Neptune Station and led his crew through the airlock. They wore spacesuits, not knowing what to expect. The station might have no atmosphere. The temperature might be absolute zero, but the airlock opened into a pressurized corridor. Cold but not freezing. Emergency lighting provided dim illumination. Their footsteps echoed on metal floors as they walked deeper into the command node. Everything was clean and pristine, preserved perfectly by the cold and vacuum. They found the command center at the heart of the structure. A large circular room with dozens of computer consoles arranged in concentric circles. Display screens covered the walls, all dark. At the center stood a raised platform with a single chair. The Admiral's chair. Jake approached the main console. He placed his hand on the activation panel, and the console recognized his biosignature. Screens flickered to life. Data began flowing across displays. The station was waking up, responding to human touch after 300 years of sleep. Lucy accessed the personnel database. She found the records of everyone in Station Theta 9. 3,400,012 humans, all in cryogenic suspension, all waiting. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, doctors, commanders, an entire military organization frozen in time. Kyle found the revival protocols. Waking everyone would take months with proper procedures. Slow thawing, medical monitoring, psychological evaluation. But they did not have months. The Velcor had days at most, maybe hours. Jake made a decision. They would use the emergency revival protocol. It was dangerous. Some people might not survive the rapid thawing, but some people was better than no people. They would wake the command staff first, about 10,000 officers and senior personnel. These people could then help wake everyone else. He entered the commands. Throughout Station Theta 9, cryogenic chambers began to activate. Warming systems engaged. Medical monitors came online. The process would take 72 hours, 3 days to bring back humanity's warriors. While the revival process ran, Jake explored the command center more thoroughly. He found the Admiral's personal quarters behind the command platform. The door was unlocked. Inside, he saw a simple room with a bed, a desk, and personal belongings left exactly as they were 300 years ago. On the desk sat a framed photograph. A woman in a military uniform stood with a young boy, maybe 8 years old. Both were smiling. Jake picked up the frame carefully. On the back was an inscription: Admiral Kate Griffin and her son Daniel. May 2547. Jake felt a sudden weight in his chest. These frozen soldiers were not just warriors. They were people. They had families, loved ones, lives. When they went into cryo-sleep, they knew they might never wake up. They volunteered anyway because someone needed to be ready. Someone needed to stand watch while the galaxy slept. 3 days later, the first cryogenic chamber opened. Admiral Kate Griffin emerged, her body covered in frost, her breath coming in gasps. Medical systems checked her vital signs while warming blankets wrapped around her automatically. She was disoriented, confused, not sure where or when she was. Jake was there when she fully woke. He explained everything. The three. The news of Station Theta 9's activation reached Earth within hours. Sensors detected the massive energy signatures as 3,000 warships powered up simultaneously. Military satellites tracked the fleet as it jumped to quantum space. There was no hiding what had happened. Humanity's sleeping army was awake and moving. Chaos erupted across Earth. The United Earth Council called an emergency session. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva, demanding explanations. How could this happen? Who authorized it? Why were ancient weapons being activated without permission? But the chaos on Earth was nothing compared to the panic in the Galactic Council. Ambassadors from dozens of species flooded communication channels. They remembered the last time humanity went to war. They remembered the devastation, the overwhelming firepower, the ruthless efficiency. Many species had nightmares about human warships for generations. The Galactic Council convened on the neutral station of Harmony Prime. Representatives gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their voices overlapping in dozens of languages. The translation systems could barely keep up. Everyone was shouting. Everyone was afraid. Secretary General Lisa Matthews represented Earth at the council meeting. She was a diplomat, trained in patience and negotiation, but even her skills were tested by the fury directed at her. Species after species demanded that Earth recall its fleet immediately. Some threatened economic sanctions. Others threatened military action. The Zaltharian ambassador was particularly aggressive. His species had fought against humans in the last war and lost badly. He stood before the council, his forearms gesturing wildly, and declared that humanity had broken the Treaty of Centauri. The penalty was expulsion from civilized space. Earth would be isolated, cut off, alone. Matthews listened to all the accusations. She let the other ambassadors exhaust their anger. Then she stood and asked for the floor. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone wanted to hear how Earth would explain this violation. Matthews began simply. She explained about the Velcor distress call. She showed them recordings of the Velcor broadcasts, the desperate pleas for help. She displayed intelligence about the Kresh Dominion, their expansion pattern, their brutality. The council members watched in uncomfortable silence. Then Matthews asked a question that changed the mood in the chamber. She asked how many species in this room had received the Velcor's distress call. Slowly, reluctantly, hands and tentacles and appendages rose throughout the chamber. Almost everyone. Almost every species in the galaxy had heard the Velcor crying for help. And how many species, Matthews continued, had sent aid? The hands lowered. The chamber fell silent. Not one species had helped. They had all heard the pleas and chosen to do nothing. They had let an entire civilization die rather than risk angering the Kresh. Matthews pulled up a star map showing Kresh expansion. She pointed out the pattern that Nina Carter had discovered. The Kresh were not stopping at the Velcor. They were heading toward the galactic core, where most civilized species lived. The Velcor were just the latest victims. Eventually, the Kresh would come for everyone in this room. The Zaltharian ambassador objected. He insisted that the Kresh could be negotiated with, reasoned with, bought off. Matthews shook her head. She showed them records of every species that had tried negotiating with the Kresh. All dead, all extinct. The Kresh did not negotiate. They conquered or killed. Those were the only options. Someone had to stop them, Matthews said. Someone had to stand up and say no. Someone had to protect those who could not protect themselves. If the Galactic Council would not do it, then humanity would do it alone. Because that was what humans did. They protected others even when it was dangerous, even when it was unpopular. Matthews concluded her speech with words that would be remembered for centuries. She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces and said simply, "Humanity is going to the Veil Nebula. We are going to save the Velcor. We are going to stop the Kresh. Anyone who wants to stop us is welcome to try." Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted in arguments. Some species wanted to send fleets to stop Earth. Others urged caution. A few, very quietly, began to wonder if maybe humanity had the right idea. While diplomats argued, the human fleet traveled through quantum space. 6 days of jumping between dimensions, covering distances that would take years at normal speeds. The ships moved in perfect formation, maintained by computer systems that had been refined over centuries. Life aboard the warships settled into routine. Soldiers drilled. Pilots practiced. Engineers maintained systems. Everyone prepared for what was coming. They knew they would face the crash soon. They knew many of them would die, but they had volunteered for this long ago, before they went into frozen sleep. Admiral Griffin used the travel time to organize her forces. She divided the fleet into battle groups, each with specific roles. Vanguard Division, led by Colonel Sam Briggs, would hit first. Their stealth frigates would slip into enemy formations and cause chaos. Then the main fleet would follow. Colonel Briggs was a legend among special forces. He had led impossible missions during the last war, the kind that seemed suicidal but somehow always succeeded. He was older now, having been frozen at age 42. But his skills remained sharp. His instincts were still deadly accurate. Dr. Emma Price, the genius physicist who had designed the quantum drive technology, spent the journey checking weapon systems. Her crowning achievement was the quantum displacement cannon, a weapon mounted only on Titan-class ships. These cannons did not fire projectiles. They created rifts in space-time, teleporting chunks of enemy ships into deep space. The targets simply ceased to exist. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres commanded the fighter wings from the Defiance. He was the youngest Titan-class commander in history, having earned his position through incredible skill and bravery. At 28 years old when he went into cryo, he was still 28 now. His reflexes were perfect, his tactical mind sharp as a blade, but not everyone aboard the fleet was a warrior. Jake Morrison and his Neptune station crew came along as observers and advisors. Griffin had insisted. Jake had started this, she said. He deserved to see it through. Besides, his crew knew more about current galactic politics than anyone else in the fleet. Lucy spent her time monitoring Velcor broadcasts. The messages were increasingly desperate. The crash had landed on the homeworld. Cities were burning. Millions were dead. The Velcor were fighting back with whatever they had, but they were artists and philosophers, not soldiers. They were losing badly. On the 5th day of travel, something unexpected happened. The fleet's sensors detected other ships in quantum space. Not crash, not human. Something else. Admiral Griffin ordered the fleet to battle stations ready for anything. The other ships dropped out of quantum space near the human fleet. They were military vessels, but their weapons were powered down. A communication signal came through. Griffin opened the channel cautiously. The face on the screen was not human. It belonged to a Thalnari, a bird-like species with brilliant feathers and sharp eyes. The Thalnari introduced himself as Commander Kriya. His people had heard about humanity's mission. They wanted to help. Griffin was cautious. She asked why. Kriya's answer was simple and bitter. 5 years ago, the Kresh had destroyed 3 Thalnari colonies, 20 million dead. The Galactic Council did nothing. The Thalnari had been alone in their grief, but now humanity was standing up to the Kresh. The Thalnari wanted to stand with them. More ships appeared over the next day. The Mordak, silicon-based life forms whose home system had been stripped by Kresh mining operations. The Valine, an insectoid hive mind that had lost 2 of its worlds. The Praxis, a warrior culture that respected humanity's courage. One by one, species joined the fleet. By the time they reached the Vale Nebula, Admiral Griffin commanded not just the human fleet, but a coalition of 17 species. Over 4,000 ships total. They called themselves the Galactic Liberation Alliance. It was not official. The Galactic Council had not authorized it. But it was real. Griffin welcomed the Allied ships. She shared human tactical data with them. Dr. Price helped Allied engineers upgrade their weapons. Colonel Briggs drilled Allied special forces in human combat techniques. The fleet became stronger through cooperation. On the morning of the 6th day, the fleet dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Velcor system. What they saw made everyone's blood boil. The Kresh Northern Fleet surrounded the Velcor homeworld. Over 5,000 ships arranged in bombardment formation. The planet below was burning. Orbital stations were destroyed. Cities lay in ruins, but the Velcor were still fighting. Their civilian ships, cargo haulers, and passenger transports flew at the Kresh vessels in desperate suicide attacks. They had no weapons, but they rammed enemy ships anyway. They were dying, but they were not giving up. Admiral Griffin watched this display of courage and felt pride. The Velcor deserved to live. They deserved to survive, and humanity was going to make sure they did. She opened a fleet-wide channel and gave orders that would change the galaxy forever. All ships, battle positions. Vanguard Division, you are cleared for infiltration. Main fleet, prepare for assault. Show these Kresh why you do. The Kresh fleet tried to reorganize. Their warlord, a massive insectoid named Zekthrak, screamed orders through the communication channels. His warriors scrambled to respond. They had faced enemies before. They had crushed rebellions and destroyed defensive fleets, but they had never encountered anything like this. Colonel Briggs and his Vanguard Division continued their assault from inside the Kresh formation. The stealth frigates were like sharks in dark water. They appeared, struck, and vanished before the Kresh could retaliate. Every attack was precise. Every shot counted. Briggs had trained for 300 years ago for exactly this kind of operation. The Kresh tried to adapt. They launched fighter swarms. Thousands of small single-pilot craft designed to overwhelm enemies through sheer numbers. The fighters spread out in all directions, searching for the invisible human ships. It was a tactic that had worked against other species. Against humans, it was a fatal mistake. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres launched from the Defiance with 2,000 human fighters. The pilots were eager, ready to prove themselves after 3 centuries of sleep. Torres led them into the Kresh swarm with confidence. He had studied every fighter tactic ever recorded. He knew exactly how to counter this attack. The 2 fighter forces met in a massive furball of ships and weapons fire. Laser beams crisscrossed the space between Velcor Prime and its moon. Explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks. The Kresh pilots were skilled and fearless. They flew aggressively, ramming human fighters when their weapons ran out. But human pilots had advantages the Kresh did not. Advanced AI assistants predicted enemy movements. Better shields absorbed damage. Superior weapons hit harder from longer range. And most importantly, human pilots had practiced this exact scenario in thousands of simulations. Torres flew through the chaos like a dancer through a crowded room. His fighter twisted and turned, dodging incoming fire while his weapons took down Kresh ships one after another. He called targets to his squadron. He coordinated attacks. He kept his pilots focused and organized while the enemy dissolved into panic. After 40 minutes of intense combat, the Kresh fighter swarm was destroyed. Out of several thousand Kresh ships, fewer than 100 escaped. Human losses were minimal. 63 fighters damaged, only 12 completely destroyed. Torres led his squadrons back to the carriers for rearming, already planning the next strike. While the fighter battle raged, Admiral Griffin brought the main fleet to bear. The human dreadnoughts advanced in formation, their massive railguns charging. These weapons were ancient technology made perfect. They fired tungsten slugs accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Each shot carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear explosion. The railguns fired. The tungsten slugs crossed the distance to the Kresh capital ships in seconds. The impacts were devastating. Kresh vessels, designed to withstand laser weapons and plasma torpedoes, could not handle kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. Hulls crumpled. Ships broke apart. Some simply vaporized from the energy release. Warlord Zekthrak realized his fleet was being annihilated. He ordered his ships to form defensive formations, to concentrate their fire on the largest human vessels. The Kresh could still win through numbers. They had 5,000 ships. The humans had less than 1,000. Simple mathematics favored the Kresh, but Zekthrak did not understand who he was fighting. He saw the 12 Titan-class battleships advancing toward his fleet, and dismissed them as large targets. He ordered his heavy weapons to focus on those ships. Thousands of missiles and energy beams converged on the Titans, enough firepower to destroy small moons. The Titan-class shields absorbed the hits. Energy barriers flared bright blue as they dissipated the incoming attacks. Some shots got through, scarring the armor, but the Titans kept coming. These ships had been built to withstand entire fleets. The Kresh bombardment was heavy, but not heavy enough. Dr. Emma Price sat in the weapons control center of the Defiance, her hands moving across holographic displays. She had waited 300 years to see her greatest invention in action. The quantum displacement cannons were charged and ready. She targeted the largest Kresh command ships and gave the order to fire. 12 quantum displacement cannons fired simultaneously. They did not shoot projectiles or energy beams. Instead, they created temporary rifts in space-time, carefully calculated tiers in the fabric of reality. The rifts opened in front of the Titan ships and inside the Kresh vessels at the same time. Large sections of the Kresh command ships simply disappeared. Entire decks, complete with crew and equipment, were teleported into deep intergalactic space. The ships did not explode. They did not burn. They just ceased to exist in coherent form. What remained were broken hulks tumbling through space, atmosphere venting, lights flickering out. The Kresh fleet broke. The warriors who had spent decades conquering peaceful civilizations suddenly faced an enemy they could not defeat. Their command structure collapsed. Their formation dissolved into chaos. Individual ships tried to escape, jumping to their version of faster-than-light travel. Some made it. Most did not. Admiral Griffin did not let up. She ordered the fleet to pursue. Human ships and allied vessels chased down fleeing Kresh craft. The Thalnari were particularly aggressive, remembering their lost colonies. The battle became a hunt. The hunt became a rout. The Kresh Northern Fleet, which had seemed invincible, was being systematically destroyed. After 6 hours of combat, it was over. The Kresh Northern Fleet no longer existed. Not a single Kresh ship escaped the system. Over 5,000 enemy vessels destroyed. The space around Velcor Prime was filled with debris and wreckage. The human and allied fleet remained largely intact. Human casualties were light but painful. 23 ships damaged, 4 destroyed completely, 812 personnel killed. Griffin read every name personally. She knew that each number represented a person who had volunteered to be here, who had chosen to fight for strangers. They deserved to be remembered. With the Kresh fleet eliminated, Griffin turned her attention to the planet below. The Velcor homeworld was still under attack. Kresh ground forces had landed days ago and were systematically destroying cities. The Velcor were fighting back with improvised weapons, but they were losing. Millions were already dead. Colonel Briggs volunteered to lead the ground assault. His special forces were trained for this. Drop pods launched from the human carriers carrying elite soldiers to the surface. They landed in the middle of Kresh-occupied cities and immediately went to work. The Kresh ground troops were warriors, but they had never faced human special forces. Briggs and his teams moved through the ruined cities like ghosts. They used advanced armor that could turn nearly invisible. They carried weapons designed to fight in urban environments. They coordinated with orbital support to devastating effect. Within 12 hours, the human forces had cleared the capital city. The surviving Velcor emerged from hiding to find their oppressors dead or fleeing. They stared at the human soldiers in awe and disbelief. The legends were true. The warriors from the old stories had come. Jake Morrison accompanied the relief teams to the surface. He wanted to see the people they had saved, to understand who they had risked everything for. The Velcor were reptilian, with scaled skin in various colors and large expressive eyes. They were beautiful in their own way, and their gratitude was overwhelming. Jake met with Elder Velthar, the leader of the surviving Velcor population. The elder was old, his scales graying, his movements slow, but his eyes were sharp and wet with tears. He embraced Jake, this human captain who had started everything by refusing to ignore a distress call. "Why?" Velthar asked. "Why would you risk everything to save a species you have never met? Why would you cross 800 light years for strangers? Why would you wake ancient warriors and start a war for us?" Jake thought about the question. He thought about his crew on Neptune Station. He thought about Admiral Griffin and her frozen soldiers. He thought about the allied species who had joined them. The answer was simple, even if the concept was complex. Because someone had to, Jake said. Because doing nothing while people died was not acceptable. Because humans believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. Because it was right. Sometimes that was reason enough. Velthar wept openly. He told Jake that the Velcor would never forget. That human names would be spoken with reverence for generations. That monuments would be built to honor the warriors who came from across the stars to save strangers. But Jake shook his head. "No monuments for him," he said. "Build monuments for the people you lost. Honor your own dead. Remember your own heroes." Humans had simply done what was necessary. The real heroes were the Velcor who fought with cargo ships and civilian weapons against impossible odds. Over the following weeks, human and allied forces provided humanitarian aid. Medical teams treated the wounded. Engineers helped rebuild infrastructure. Supply ships brought food and materials. The Velcor civilization had been pushed to the brink of extinction. Now slowly it began to recover, but the war was not over. News of the Battle of Velcor Prime spread through the galaxy at light speed. The Kresh Dominion, which had never suffered a defeat, was shocked and enraged. Their supreme overlord? Admiral Griffin's challenge spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, species that had been terrorized by the Kresh began to respond, not with words, with action. Ships began arriving at Velcor Prime from across known space. They came to join the fight. The Mordak brought their heavy mining ships retrofitted with weapons. Silicon-based life forms who had lost their home system wanted revenge. The Valine arrived with their hive ships, thousands of warrior drones ready to die for the cause. The Praxis sent their finest warriors, eager to test themselves against the Kresh. More species followed. The Talix, who had lost colonies to Kresh raids. The Breen, whose trade routes had been destroyed. The Novan Collective, peaceful beings who finally found something worth fighting for. One by one, they pledged their forces to what was now called the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Admiral Griffin welcomed them all. She shared human technology freely. Dr. Emma Price worked around the clock, helping Allied engineers upgrade their ships with human weapons and shields. The quantum drive technology that let humans cross vast distances quickly was adapted for Allied vessels. The fleet grew stronger every day. Colonel Briggs trained Allied special forces in human combat tactics. Ground warfare, shipboarding, urban combat. He shared everything humans had learned during their last war. The Allied soldiers were eager students. They had seen what human forces could do at Velcor Prime. They wanted to learn those skills. But while the Alliance grew stronger, so did the Kresh threat. Hive Queen Zarkesh was not bluffing. She assembled the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 ships drawn from across the Kresh Empire. Every warrior that could be spared. Every weapon that could be mounted. The Queen herself would lead the fleet to crush humanity. The Kresh did not hide their intentions. They broadcast their plans openly. They would jump directly to the Sol system. They would destroy Earth and all human colonies. They would make an example of humanity so terrible that no species would ever dare challenge the Kresh again. Fear would maintain the Empire forever. Earth prepared for the assault. The remaining human defense forces, ships that had not been at Station Theta 9, formed defensive positions around the home world. Orbital weapons platforms powered up. Ground-based missile systems armed their warheads. Evacuation procedures were activated for civilians. Everyone knew this battle would determine humanity's survival. Admiral Griffin received word of the Kresh mobilization. She immediately ordered the Galactic Liberation Alliance to return to Sol. The Allied species did not hesitate. They had committed to this fight. If the Kresh wanted to attack Earth, they would have to go through the entire Alliance fleet. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance as the fleet prepared to jump. Lucy was beside him, along with the rest of his Neptune station crew. They had started this by refusing to ignore a distress call. Now they would see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. The fleet jumped to quantum space. Over 6,000 ships moving as one. Human vessels at the core. Allied ships surrounding them in protective formations. They traveled for 3 days, covering the distance between Velcor and Sol. When they dropped out of quantum space, they were home. Admiral Griffin positioned her forces in a defensive shell around Earth. The most powerful human ships held the inner positions. Allied vessels formed outer layers. This would be a defensive battle. The Kresh would have to break through multiple lines of ships to reach Earth. Griffin intended to make every meter of space cost them dearly. The Kresh arrived exactly when they said they would. 10,000 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel simultaneously. The largest fleet ever assembled by any species. They formed a sphere around the Alliance defensive positions, surrounding them completely. Hive Queen Zarkesh's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, took position at the formation's center. For a moment, neither side moved. The two fleets faced each other across empty space. Human sensors counted enemy ships. Kresh sensors did the same. The numbers were clear. The Kresh had nearly twice as many ships. By simple mathematics, they should win. But wars were not won by mathematics alone. They were won by courage, by determination, by the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. The Alliance forces were defending their homes, their families, their futures. The Kresh were fighting for conquest and fear. That difference mattered. Hive Queen Zarkesh opened a communication channel. Her voice was harsh and clicking, translated by computer systems into human language. She demanded humanity's surrender. Disband the Alliance. Return to frozen sleep. Accept Kresh Dominion. These were her terms. Refusal meant extinction. Admiral Griffin replied simply, "No." Then she cut the channel and gave the order to open fire. The Battle of Sol began with human railguns launching their deadly cargo. The battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy had started. The Kresh attacked from all directions simultaneously. They threw everything at the Alliance defensive shell. Missiles by the thousands, energy weapons that could melt ship armor, kamikaze drones programmed to ram enemy vessels, bioweapons designed to kill ship crews, planet-killer missiles meant to crack Earth's crust. The Alliance forces met every attack with determination. Human point defense systems shot down incoming missiles. Allied shields absorbed energy weapon hits. Fighters launched to intercept drones. Medical teams prepared for bioweapon exposure. The planet-killer missiles were priority targets. None would reach Earth. The battle raged for 2 days and nights. Space around Earth burned with weapons fire. Ships on both sides took damage, caught fire, exploded. The casualty count climbed higher with each passing hour, but the Alliance defensive shell held. Every time the Kresh pushed through one layer, they met another. Human determination backed by Allied courage proved stronger than Kresh numbers. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres flew constant missions. His fighter squadron launched, fought, returned for repairs and rearming, then launched again. They had been in continuous combat for 48 hours. Pilots were exhausted. Ships were battered. But they kept flying. Earth was behind them. They would not fail. Colonel Briggs led boarding actions against Kresh capital ships. His special forces would disable enemy vessels from within, turning powerful weapons against the Kresh fleet. It was dangerous work. Many teams did not return. But those that succeeded turned the tide in small battles throughout the larger war. On the third day, Hive Queen Zarkesh made a fatal decision. She was frustrated by her fleet's inability to break through the Alliance defenses. She decided to commit her personal flagship to the front lines. The Eternal Dominion was the most powerful ship in the Kresh fleet. Its presence would inspire the warriors and terrify the enemy. Admiral Griffin saw the massive flagship moving forward. She recognized the opportunity immediately. The Hive Queen controlled the entire Kresh military through psychic links. Kill the Queen and the fleet would collapse. Griffin opened a priority channel to all Titan-class battleships. All Titans, focus fire on the Eternal Dominion. Quantum displacement cannons, full power. All other ships provide covering fire. We are going to cut the head off this snake. Fire on my mark. 12 Titan-class battleships turned their attention to one target. The most powerful weapons ever created by humanity charged simultaneously. Dr. Emma Price coordinated the firing solution from the Defiance. The calculations had to be perfect. 12 quantum rifts opening at exactly the same moment, all targeting the same ship. Griffin gave the order. Fire. 12 quantum displacement cannons discharged their energy. 12 rifts in spacetime opened in front of the Titan ships and inside the Eternal Dominion simultaneously. The massive flagship, over 5 kilometers long, simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not exploded. Scattered across 1,000,000 light-years of space, its particles spread so thin they would never be found. The effect on the Kresh fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Without the Hive Queen's psychic presence, the warrior caste lost coordination. Ships stopped following orders. Some continued fighting out of instinct. Others simply stopped moving. Many attempted to flee. The organized Kresh war machine collapsed into chaos. Admiral Griffin did not hesitate. She ordered a full offensive. The Alliance fleet, which had been defending for 3 days, suddenly surged forward. They pushed through the disorganized Kresh formation like a knife through soft tissue. What had been a desperate defensive battle became a rout. The Battle of Sol lasted another 6 hours. By the end, over half the Kresh fleet was destroyed. The survivors scattered in all directions, jumping to random coordinates to escape. The Kresh Dominion, which had terrorized the galaxy for decades, was broken. Their empire would shatter into feuding factions. They would never threaten anyone again. The cost was heavy. Over 3,000 Alliance ships damaged or destroyed. 20,000 personnel killed, human and alien alike. Earth's moon was scarred by Kresh weapons fire. Several orbital stations were completely destroyed, but Earth survived. Humanity survived. The Alliance had won. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked out at the debris field. Ships and bodies floated everywhere. The price of victory was visible in every direction. Lucy stood beside him, tears running down her face. They had won, but winning looked like this: death and destruction.